Okay, everyone, hello and welcome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So this is Secret Atlas's first ever webinar. It's actually a first webinar in a series of 3 webinars. So we have 2 further webinars coming in next week on East Greenland and specifically on our photography trips. But today's webinar is focusing on Svalbard and exploring Svalbard on expedition micro cruise, which is what we specialize here at Secret Atlas. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So everyone who's joined, all of your cameras and microphones are set to off. So hopefully you can only hear and see myself. But if you do have any questions during the webinar, we do have some time allocated at the end to run through those questions. So do please ask as you go. We have my colleague Margarita online as well, and she will be fielding some of the questions as we proceed through the webinar. But yeah, I can see some familiar faces on the attendee list, so welcome everybody. For those of you who do not know me, I am Lewis Morcombe. I am one of the expedition specialists here at Secret Atlas, and it's a real honour to host this webinar this evening. Svalbard has a very special place in my heart. It was actually the first destination in the Arctic that I went to, and I've been fortunate and lucky enough to visit on a number of occasions. So I'm very excited to share with you the beauty of Svalbard tonight and everything Svalbard has to offer. So I thought we would start with a little bit of a history of Secret Atlas and who we are. So Secret Atlas, so this is actually our 5th season in operation. So we've just wrapped up our 5th season last month. But Secret Atlas was very heavily inspired in the early days by the early voyages and the early expeditions. So some of you might recognize these ships here. So we have the Fram on the left, and we've actually got the Belgica on the right. And it was these early ships which really led the way in polar exploration, and that's a piece of history we're looking to redeliver here at Secret Atlas. And now, don't worry, for those of you who are familiar with the expeditions and the early expeditions, such as the Belgica, we don't overwinter. Our trips are much shorter than that. But Secret Atlas was set up by our founder, Michele, who is based over in Italy, and our co-founder, Mariano, who is based in Argentina, both of whom are expeditioners, explorers themselves. Mariano's skied from coast to coast over in Greenland, and Michele is a sailor himself, and he had a realization on one of his sail voyages, and that's where the inspiration from Secret Atlas came from. So he actually sailed up to Svalbard on a very small ship with a crew of just 5, and then he sailed across to Greenland. And it was when he was making a landing in East Greenland, him and his 5 crew disembarked in a small Inuit community town called Itokotomit. It's a population of 300 people, and these locals welcomed Michele and his crew with open arms. They showed him around the village and allowed them into their houses, and it was a really organic experience. But when Michele returned to his sailboat, he noticed a much bigger cruise ship of 200 people coming in to dock. And now that 200 people overran the town, and the locals not necessarily felt comfortable with that. So, Michele, that's where the spark for small micro expedition cruising came from. We wanted to take a very small number of guests to these fantastic destinations in the most sustainable way possible. And just being 12 passengers on a ship really enables that. But before we get into our product here at Secret Atlas, I thought I'd give a brief overview of where Svalbard is. So those of you who haven't been, Svalbard is an archipelago. It's actually Norwegian owned. It sits at 78 degrees latitude north. So it's very far north. To put that into context, the North Pole is located at 90 degrees latitude north, and on our voyages we often cross the 80-degree latitude north mark, and that's always a cause for celebration on board, because this is a real gateway to the North Pole, and many of the early explorers, expeditioners, use Svalbard as a stop-off point. But for those of you traveling to Svalbard today, we are most likely going to be having to do a connection in Oslo. There are daily flights from Oslo up to Longyearbyen, It's about a 3 hour, just over a 3 hour flight. And in the summer months, we can actually fly from Tromsø as well. So that ties in really nicely if you're doing a bit of a road trip, a bit more of a wider, broader trip in Norway as well. But yes, why choose micro expedition cruising, and why choose to come with Secret Atlas? So as I mentioned earlier, so we have 2 ships currently here at Secret Atlas. So being just 12 passengers in these environments really connects you to that environment. When you're making excursions, when you're making landings, there's only going to be 12 of you. And unlike some of the biggest ships, when you're making a landing with 100 people and all you hear is the chatter and the click of cameras, with 12 people, you can really find that solitude and that peace you are looking for. And likewise, so both of our ships have got 2 zodiacs which we use on all of our excursions. So we have 6 guests in a zodiac, so it's really a real spacious experience in the zodiac, especially if you've got your camera and your lenses and any equipment that you might need. So that does mean, because we've got the 2 zodiacs, it does mean we have a ferry. Our guide ratio is 2 expedition guides to 12 guests. So on all of our voyages, we will have 2 expedition guides. So it's a very intimate experience. The expedition leaders, the years of experience, a lot of them have actually come from the bigger ships, and they are wanting to work with us here at Secret Atlas and wanting a much more intimate relationship with their guests as well. So it's really that one-on-one time you get with your guests. So you can see here in the bottom right corner, one of our guides, Virgil, he is going over the sea charts with one of our guests. So it's that real one-to-one connection. The guides will have breakfast, they'll have lunch, they'll have dinner with you. They might even have a drink with you in the evening. So you've got a lot of opportunity to get to know your guides and ask these questions. And it's a real educational experience on board. But not only that, so being a smaller ship, we have got access to a lot more areas of Svalbard. Now in Svalbard, there are some new legislations coming into place for 2025, which I will touch upon a little bit later. Being a smaller ship and those landing sites, it doesn't affect us as greatly. And we very much think it's business as usual moving into next year. But because our ship is a little bit smaller, we can enter the smaller channels, we can enter the shallower fjords. So it gives us greater area to explore as well. And we have the open bridge policy on both of our vessels. So one of my favorite things to do in the morning, grab a coffee, head up to the bridge and have a chat with the captain. And you'll often find information from the captain. Often the boat will be transiting overnight, so we'll be waking up in new destinations. So you can speak to the captain about that transit as well. But really for me, why you should choose a micro expeditions is the time. So we'll come on to our itineraries, but we do not run to a fixed schedule. We are very flexible. So the time that you get off the boat is a lot greater. One great example I always like to share. I was actually fortunate enough to be on one of our trips earlier this year, and we were literally about to sit down for dinner, and then the captain runs in and he shouts the 2 words, polar bear. And everyone stopped, everyone looked at each other, and there was a bit of excitement, a bit of trepidation, what's going to happen? And the 2 expedition leaders we were with, they said to everyone, right, let's get in the Zodiacs. And within 10 minutes, the whole 12 people were in the Zodiacs, and we had that wildlife encounter. And the chef was all for it. The chef was very happy. He said, hey guys, you go out, explore, we'll put a hold on dinner. So with the small ships, we've got that flexibility in order to do that. So for me, that is the real essence of micro expedition cruising, is the time that you get off the ship. But if we have a closer look at some of our itineraries, now I've put here flexible itineraries and seasonality. That is because dependent on what time of year you are going, the itineraries will look slightly different. So Svalbard actually has 4 seasons. So you have the polar night, which actually runs from October all the way through to February. Now we don't run in the polar night. It's 24-hour darkness. Everything is frozen over. The sea ice is totally frozen over, and the temperatures are extremely cold. So we do not take our guests there, but we do start our itineraries in early season itineraries as spring itineraries. This is April, May, and early June. Now these itineraries are we typically run them as photography tours, because that is the best time in terms of the light. So it's a really beautiful time to experience it. But even if you're not a photographer, I do strongly recommend that time of year. But with all of our itineraries, we don't fly, so you'll fly into London, which is where the ship will depart. And then we will slowly head out of Isfjord, which is this fjord system here. And it depends. When you board the ship, you will sit down with the captain and the expedition team, and they will go over the proposed itinerary for the week. Now, the reason we don't have set itineraries is because of the weather, it's because of the ice conditions, and it's because what we see en route. But a typical voyage, we will probably head out of Isfjord and we will try and head up on the northwest coast, and we'll focus on the fjord system up here. And our early season departures, this is about as far around as we can get to this fjord system here, and then the sea ice becomes too thick and we can't progress through. But as we head into the summer months, so June, July, August, and even September, the sea ice does start to melt, and we will make a full circumnavigation of the islands if the conditions allow. But we do need 10 or 12 days to do that. So yeah, you can have a look on our website, but our typical voyages are 8, 10 or 12 days. And we also have full departures. So our late August, September departures, that is the return of the snow, it's the return of the ice, it's when Svalbard is starting to freeze back over, so it's a really beautiful time again to go. Again, the sun is much lower in the sky, so you've got those beautiful oranges, pinky colors in the sky, so it's a really nice time to visit. And often, as I said earlier, if the conditions allow, we will try and head up to the ice edge for 2 reasons. We do really enjoy passing the 80-degree north mark on our voyages, but also visiting the ice edge, which is a landmass where the North Pole is a real experience, both visually and sensually. It's a real beautiful place to visit. So we do try and visit that on our voyages if the conditions are favorable. Now, the wildlife in Svalbard. So I always describe to my guests, Svalbard is like a safari with ice. It is all about the wildlife. Now, I can already see there's been a few questions popping up about the new regulations, so let's address that. So the new regulations coming into place for 2025. So as I mentioned earlier, they are affecting the number of landing sites that we can land at, but being a smaller ship, it doesn't really apply too heavily to us. But the other restriction is the distances we can get to the wildlife. So they are putting further restrictions in. So, for example, the walrus is 150 meters, and depending on the season, the polar bear will be either 500 or 300 meters. Now, a question that we get, does this affect your voyages? The short answer is absolutely not. So we are in the polar bear's home. We are in the polar bear's territory. In my opinion, Svalbard is the best place to view polar bears in the wild and in their natural habitat. It's where you have the greatest chance of seeing them hunt on the sea ice, and it's the greatest chance you get a white polar bear on a white background, but as you can see, the polar bear isn't actually pure white, it is sort of a yellowy color. So yeah, it's really not going to affect our voyages. We will try and see them up at the ice edge as well, like we go on all of our trips. But seeing a polar bear at any distance is a humbling experience. This middle picture here, this was actually taken on a voyage that I was on, and the polar bear was about 700 meters away. Now the picture was taken with a zoom lens camera, but just seeing the polar bear, even at 700 meters, was a humbling experience. It makes you feel really small. And in terms of the other wildlife, like I say, it's not all about the polar bear. Svalbard is a real safari destination. So other wildlife we have near around, so we've got the walruses, we've got the reindeer, we've got the Arctic fox. So this picture in the bottom right corner is the Arctic fox, actually in its summer coat, it's called its blue coat. But if you go early season, so if you go in April or maybe even in early May, you'll see the Arctic fox in its pure white coat. But not only that, we do get really good seal sightings in Svalbard. So there's a number of seals that we see. We see the ring seal, the bearded seal, and a little less common, we can see the hooded seal, but we often see the harp seal as well. Now, for those birders out there, Svalbard is a fantastic destination for birding. The bird migration period, so birds will start to arrive in Svalbard for breeding in late May. and they will be in Svalbard all the way through to around mid to late August. And it's a fantastic destination for birds. We'll see lots of guillemots, we'll see lots of little auks, we'll probably hear the little auks before we see them. We'll see Arctic terns, we'll see the Atlantic puffin as well, which is one of the big ticket items. But not only that, similarly to the birds, the whale migration. So we do get a number of whale species visit Svalbard in those summer months. So again, sort of from May all the way through to August, sometimes into September, we might see humpbacks, we might see minke whales, we might see fin whales, we might see beluga whales. They're probably the four most common. There are some other rare visitors to Svalbard, but we won't necessarily see them all. But as I say, this is wildlife. Being on a smaller vessel, it does give us greater opportunity to view the wildlife, but giving yourself 8, 10 or 12 days really gives you that time, and we have a very high success rate in spotting all of these animals on our voyages. So yeah, that's a little bit about the wildlife. But it's not all about that wildlife, it is about the landscapes as well. So as I've mentioned, we have the bird cliffs, so we will be visiting the bird cliffs in the right seasons. They're very noisy, very smelly places to visit, but they are beautiful places to visit nevertheless. But year round, we will be visiting a number of glaciers as well. So visiting the glaciers, it will happen in two ways. Sometimes in the summer season, if the glaciers retreated a little bit, we will make a land excursion and we'll do a short hike to go and visit the glacier. But sometimes if the glacier is on the water edge, we will get in the Zodiacs and we'll do a cruise by the glacier. Now, obviously, we don't get too close to the glacier because if we do witness a carving, it is spectacular, but it can cause quite a wake. So we don't want to be too close for that reason. But we will see and you'll witness a lot of different ice formations, especially in early season and late season. You'll see a lot of different sea ice formations. We will have a lot of fast ice around in the early season. Now, fast ice is the ice which is fastened, attached to the land. This is prime breeding territory for the seals and the walruses, resting territory as well. But that also means it's prime hunting territory for the polar bear as well. But we'll get a lot of different forms of ice, like in the bottom right corner, we've got some big, this is called tabler ice, but you'll learn a lot more on the expedition about the different ice formations and how it forms and how it changes the landscape. But now I want to talk about what the onboard experience is like and what is included in a voyage with us here at Secret Atlas. So at Secret Atlas, we don't like to charge for any extras. So once you step on board that ship, you can feel comfortable knowing that everything is included in your voyage. So all of our excursions are included. So typically we'll run sort of a morning excursion, we'll be back on the boat for lunch and we'll get out in the afternoon. So typically we're looking at sort of 2 excursions a day, but that's not set in stone. Sometimes we will be out doing we even do midnight excursions to sort of witness the midnight sun, because we do have 24-hour daylight and it's a very unique experience. But as I mentioned, the excursions will either be Zodiac cruising, looking at the wildlife, looking at the different ice formations and landscapes and glaciers, or we will be arranging hiking excursions. Now, the hiking excursions are very different in terms of what season. So in early season, so this picture in the middle here, we did bring the ship in close to the ice, and the guests will do a short walk on the sea ice, which is a really, really fantastic experience. But in the summer season, so if you are a big hiker, maybe going later on is a good idea, because it does give, as the snow melts, as the ice melts, you've got greater possibilities of hiking. But if you're not much of a hiker, that's not a problem. Being a small group of just 12, we can split that group up as well. So if half of the group want to go off and do a slightly longer, more strenuous hike, that's absolutely fine. If half the rest of the group want to sit back and do a shorter walk or a Zodiac cruise, we can make that happen as well. And not only the excursions, so the expedition team, our expedition team, they all have their own specialities. A lot of them have PhDs in marine biology, or they're ornithologists. So our guides have a lot of knowledge and a lot of wealth, and they want to pass a lot of that knowledge on to you. So we do run a series of lectures on board our ships. So some evenings we all gather around and the guides will put on a lecture, which is a real fantastic experience. Both of our ships, I'll come onto our ships shortly, but both of our ships have got a hot tub, have got a sauna, Now, if you ask me, this is the best place to unwind from a day of excursions. So last excursion happens, grab a beer, grab a gin and tonic, grab a hot chocolate, whatever your tipple is, sit in that hot tub and watch the Arctic landscape roll past. It's the perfect way to unwind from a day of excursions. But likewise, all of our meals are included. So breakfast and lunch tend to be a bit more of a buffet, grab and go style, whereas dinner is more of a formal. I say formal, our ships aren't formal, our ships are very casual environment, but it's more of a plated service meal. But the chefs on board are very, very good. The cuisine tends to be local affair, very sort of Scandinavian, Norwegian. So yeah, you'll be well looked after, and there'll be snacks provided throughout the day, and a number of sort of hot drinks to warm you up as well. And also we provide you with the muck boots. So the muck boots are boots that you'll wear when you're going out on excursions. So we always recommend that you wear them, especially when you're getting in and out of the zodiacs. When you're making a landing, you'll be either stepping out onto ice, or you might be stepping out into sort of shallow seawater. So these muck boots, they will keep your feet warm and dry. So they are provided. And we also provide you with the all-in-one suits as well. So again, they will keep you warm, they will keep you dry. You might not need them in the summer months, but in the early season and the late season, you probably will. In temperature range for Svalbard, we are looking in the early season. It can be, so in April, May, it can be as low as sort of -10, -15, up to sort of 5 degrees. But then in the summer season, so sort of June, July, August, we're looking 5 to 15 degrees. One day this year, we even got as high as 20 degrees, which is a little bit scary, but you won't necessarily need those all-in-one suits if the weather is that warm. So to talk about our ships, so we have 2 ships which are located in Svalbard, and our ships are your gateway to Svalbard. These are the vessels which will get you to where we need to be. Both of our ships have a high ice class rating. The Freya is a 1A ice class rated, so that means she can get through some of the sea ice and then get you to those remote corners of Svalbard. The Freya, she's a very comfortable expedition ship. She is a Swedish ship. You can see from the inside, she's got a very traditional, a very homely feel to her. You've got the nice restaurant area, you've got the lounge area. We have 7 guest cabins on our ships. So on the Freya, we have 4 of what we call the signature twin cabins, and we've got 1 fixed double cabin, and we've got 2 solo single cabins as well. We have a lot of solo travelers. All of our cabins have got a private ensuite, but there is a lot of deck space on the Freya, so she's great ship for sort of watching the Arctic scenery go past or photographing the wildlife. You've got a really nice back deck here, and even at the bow of the ship, you've got some really nice viewing platforms as well. And our second ship is the MV Vikingfjord. So she's a Norwegian ship. She is slightly newer in sort of design. She was actually fitted out by a Norwegian design company. So you can see she's really light, fresh, lots of natural wood. So we've got a really nice expedition lounge on the Vikingfjord. Again, similarly to the Freya, there are 7 guest cabins. So 1 fixed penthouse double, and then we have 4 twin or double cabins on the Vikingfjord. They can be configured into either way. And we have the lounge up in the bridge. As I mentioned, both our ships have got our open door policy, so this is a really nice place for guests to relax as well. But likewise on the Vikingfjord, really nice deck space, so lots of opportunity to get out, get a photograph in as well. Now, you've seen a lot about Svalbard, and for us, we are at Secret Atlas very aware of climate change. And one of the key sort of drivers in us to keep going is we feel our expeditions are real eye-openers to our guests. Like, everyone's heard of climate change, but once you're in Svalbard or up in the Arctic, this is where you really see it sort of affecting. So we find our guests always come back with a new appreciation. They come back sometimes often humbled, and they will make a lot of decisions consciously to make improvements for the wildlife. But when we are on our trips, we do look out for the wildlife. So this picture here on the right hand side, so on all of our trips, on all of our zodiacs, we have rubbish collecting equipment. So when we do make landings, if we do see any plastics, if we do see any fishing equipment, we don't want that to be there. We want to bring that back onto the ship. And when we dock, we will dispose of it the best way possible. So we like to leave the environments cleaner than as we found them. On a trip I was on, actually, we did find quite a large fishing net, and we took it back onto the ship, and one of the ABs, so the able-bodied seamen, they transformed that fishing net into a hammock, and they hung that up on the ship. So that was a really nice touch in how we can sort of reuse some of this waste as well. But not only rubbish collection. So on the left here, this is a company called Yachts for Science. So they do a lot of work mapping the seabed and mapping the marine life. So we invite them on a couple of times a year, which enables them to do their work. So they are mapping the seafloor, and they're looking at the life down there in the seabed. And it's surprising how much life there is in Svalbard seabed. So it's a way for them to monitor and keep track of any climate change. But it's a really nice experience. If these guys are on board one of your trips, it doesn't interfere with the itinerary in any way. It actually enhances the itinerary, because they are launching RVs into the depths of the ocean, and you can all be on board with them when they're doing these research missions, and you can actually see the seafloor for yourself. And they always do a report as well, so that report will be shared if you are on any of their voyages, or if you're interested, do let us know and we can share those reports for you. And we're part of a few organizations, so as you can see on the below. I won't go into all of them, just as I am conscious of time, and we've got a few questions to get through. But we are part of 1% for the Planet. So 1% of our total revenue at Secret Atlas goes to 1% for the Planet. And they're almost an umbrella charity, and the money gets distributed through a network of sort of conservation charities, and especially sort of marine and wildlife conservation. So the money goes to very good causes. And we are also part of IACO, which is the Association of Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators. And we're also part of the Polar Tourism and Guiding Association. So both of these organizations mean we follow certain practices to be as respectful to the environment as possible. It also trains our guides, and which will educate our guests as well. So that is a very, very sort of quick overview of Svalbard, but I could see a lot of questions popping in through that. So I'm just going to take a minute to go through some of these questions and answer them. So one of the questions here we have, what about seasickness on the boat? So on our ships, we tend to stick to the fjords. We tend to stick to the more protected areas. So generally speaking, it is calm. We always try and navigate where it is calm. If we see a particular bad bit of weather up in the north, maybe we'll head down south first. So we have got the option to flip the itineraries. But if it does become rough, if there is a storm, the expedition team, the captain are on board, and we will always be tracking the sea conditions. So they will give you enough warning. And we actually have medication on board as well. So you can take preventative measures. Once you're feeling seasick, it's often too late. So it's best to be preventative. Do you have any cabins for solo travelers on the Vikingfjord? So yes, we have 2 cabins for solo travelers. I will be honest with you, the solo cabins typically are the ones which sell out first. But once those solo cabins are sold out, if you are happy to share, we can offer you a twin share cabin as well. But yeah, it's best to book in advance. There is another question. How far in advance do we need to book? So if you are interested in booking for 2025, we've still got some good availability on both of our ships, so do reach out. But typically guests are booking sort of 18 to 8 months before departure. As we get closer, sort of 6 to 4 months, we've sold out of some of our 2025 trips already, so it is best to get in and book early. How active? What's the activity level? So the activity level of the ship, as I explained, will typically be out of the ship twice a day, but we can cater for different levels of activity. So if you are looking for sort of hiking, big hiking, like we will maybe look at to split in a group up. If you're someone who just wants to sit on board and you're on a beautiful ship, you're in the Arctic, if you want to sit on the board with a cup of coffee or a gin and tonic, you can absolutely do that. You don't feel there's any pressure to come out on any of their excursions. But yeah, I wouldn't say any of the excursions are sort of extreme. They're all very gentle excursions on board. There is a couple of questions about kayaking on board. So as our ships are much smaller, we do not have kayaks on board any of our ships, but we do offer other activities. So like if anyone is into fishing, we'll often do a bit of fishing from the boat, which can be a really nice way to spend a morning. And often the chefs will be out fishing as well. So we want to be having local fish for dinners if you eat fish. So that is a really nice activity if you're into fishing. And we've got a question, can a double room be made into a triple room? So all of our rooms are pretty much set. So a double room is a double room. The one exception to that is on the Vikingfjord. So on the Vikingfjord, with the penthouse double cabin is connecting. There's a connecting door to a bunk cabin. So if you are a family traveling with children, that is a really good option. Typically on our departures, we recommend 7 and above. So if you are traveling with children, we typically recommend that they be 7 and above. And on the upper side of the scale, we do not have an upper age restriction. As long as everyone has the right insurances in place, there is no age limit on our trips. And we have a question here. Can you tell us a little bit more about your beauty of the glaciers and icebergs? Are they deep blue the way they are in Antarctica? The glaciers, absolutely. So the glaciers are that deep blue, that crystal blue. You've got so many shades of blue. So the glaciers really are. In terms of the icebergs in Svalbard, if you're someone who's been to upper parts of the Arctic, so you say Greenland, or if you've been down to Antarctica, the icebergs in Svalbard, although they are big, they're not as grand and they're not as big, but they're still really beautiful. But if you're someone who's into ice and into ice formations, I definitely recommend one of our early season spring trips. It's when we've got a lot of sea ice around as well, and it's all breaking up in front of you. So it's a real beautiful experience. And do you have icebreakers? So our ships have a very high ice class rating, which means they can break through some ice. But there are strict laws as well around Svalbard. So if it is fast ice, so that's the ice I mentioned, which is attached to the land, that is hunting territory for the bears. It is breeding territory as well for some of the marine life. So we do not break that ice. But if we're out at sea, we can break through some ice. Another question here we have, I am booked on an early season trip for next April. What is your best advice for clothing, both on the ship and around London? So that's a very good question. So as I say, when you're on the ship, you will be provided with the muck boots. You're provided with the all-in-one suit as well. When you're on the ship, we actually provide you with slippers. These are both for sort of indoor use on the ship and actually out on the deck. They're very warm. I was surprised that's all you need when you're out on the deck is those slippers. But I would recommend taking a pair of hiking boots, especially if you're going in early season in April on the bin. There probably will still be quite a lot of snow around on the ground. So if you have a few extra days in on the bin, it's definitely a good idea. And even some people, they do prefer to have their own shoes. So when we go out on excursions, if you prefer to wear your own walking boots, that is absolutely fine. We just strongly recommend they are fully waterproof. Now, talking of London, we do recommend that our guests arrive at least 24 hours before departure. And London is a fantastic town. You could easily spend a few days in London. It's got some of the best museums on polar history. It's got some fantastic museums of the early explorers, and it's got really unique museums on sort of some of the settlements you get in Svalbard. Svalbard, there is historically has been a lot of mining. There's a lot of Russian settlements. There's a couple of other settlements as well, so you can find out some really good history about that, and you can do some good land-based excursions as well. So yes, I definitely would recommend a couple of extra nights in Longyearbyen. And another interesting question here is, have you seen much change in the extent of sea ice over the summer months in the past few years? So it is a very good question. And to be honest with you, each year it's totally different. So each year, last summer, the winter lasted a lot longer. So the sea ice was there up until sort of mid-June. And then we had a very, very warm summer, as I mentioned. Some of the days got up to sort of 15 degrees. So it did melt quite quickly. But typically as a whole, obviously we are all aware the sea ice is melting faster. But yeah, we will typically see a lot of sea ice sort of early season, and it always does return sort of in September time as well. One good question is, what proportion of your voyages do you see polar bears? Is it fairly likely? So obviously polar bears, wild animals, we're viewing them in their natural environment, so we can never guarantee it. But as I said, we have a very high success rate. We've been running, this is our 5th season in operation, and in Svalbard, I don't think there's ever been a case where we haven't seen a polar bear. Sometimes a polar bear is at a distance, sometimes it is a little bit closer, but then we've got very good opportunity to see polar bears. Someone said, do we reach out for help or call for assistance? So after this webinar, everyone attending this webinar will receive an email. That email will be from me, and you can reply directly to me, and then we will be able to assist you with your query. But yeah, we are both online, so via email, or we have a telephone number as well, which will be in that email, so we can speak over the phone. We can even arrange Zoom calls. I'll come on to our sort of office team and our sales team shortly. What's the best period for birds? So yeah, as I said, if you're into birding, the best period is between late May and mid-August. So I'd really say sort of June, July is going to be your best time for birding. How mobile do you need to be to get in and out of the zodiacs? So another very good question. So the zodiacs, there are ladders to get down, so there are steps. So there's about 3 steps to get down. So as long as you're able to get up and down steps, that's as mobile as you need to be in the zodiacs. Another couple of questions we've got coming in. So what is the general age range of passengers? So the age range of passengers, the bulk of our passengers are sort of between 55 and 75, but that's not set. We get a lot of, especially solo travelers, we get a lot of younger solo travelers, but we are seeing a lot of younger and even older people on our voyages. But yeah, I'd say the bulk is sort of between 55 and 75, but we do get multi-generational families on board, so it is really varied. Do you offer special menus like vegan? Yes, absolutely. I'm actually vegetarian myself, and I was on board, and I've been with vegans, and the chefs cater really well for all dietary requirements, so you'll be well taken care of. Gluten-free, anything you name it, any special dietary requirements, we collect all that data from you before you depart, so we can provision and prepare accordingly. What time of year is best for cubs? So the early season is the best time of year for cubs. So if you are wanting to see cubs, April, May time are probably the best time to see the cubs. Another question, is there a doctor on board? What do you do in a medical emergency? Helicopter, question mark. So yes, so there isn't a doctor on board, but all of the crew, so as I've mentioned, there's a 2 expedition crew, but there is a ship crew of 7 as well. So everyone is medically first aid trained, but if there was a real medical emergency on board, it would be calling for assistance. And in Svalbard, that will most likely be a helicopter, but you do need to make sure you've all got appropriate travel insurance, which we can talk you through as well. I'm just going to rattle through a couple more questions. I know we're at the end of our time, but we've probably got time for a couple more questions. Will we find out in advance which expedition guides will be on our voyage? Yes, so absolutely. So our expedition guides, as I say, they're the ones, they make our expeditions. So yeah, our expedition guides, you can find out who they will be for the 25 season. The majority of our guides are already booked and locked in. So yeah, drop us an email, drop us a call, and we can tell you the particular guide who will be on the trip. One question, is there Wi-Fi on board? Yes, so both of our ships are fitted with Starlink Wi-Fi, so that is on for 24 hours a day. So when you're on board the boat, you've got constant access to Wi-Fi. Obviously, if we are doing any excursions, you won't have the Wi-Fi when you're out and about, and you won't have any signal. And I think we're gonna wrap it up. I've got one more question, is will you have this video on YouTube? So yeah, please allow us about 24 hours and we will get this video on YouTube for everyone, so you can share it with your friends and your family and anyone who has been unable to join the call. So yeah, we will follow up with that, and any questions and any answers we haven't gotten to, we will follow up in an email. So I'm sorry, there's been a lot of questions, so we can't get through them all today, but we will follow up with an email. And the last thing today is I just wanted to introduce you to some of our office staff. So these are most likely people that you will be talking to, and the people who will be replying to any of your questions via email. So I've got my 2 wonderful colleagues. So we have Anna, she's based over in Connecticut. She's got over 2 decades of guiding in the polar regions. She's visited both polar regions over 100 times, so she's got a wealth of experience. So she looks after our North American and our Southern American markets, as well as the Indian market. So she will be in touch. And then we have Margarita, likewise. As you can see, she is an Arctic guide. She's been guiding for a number of years. She's extremely knowledgeable. She's based out of Italy, so she does look after all of our European market, Asian market, and Australasian as well. So yeah, if you do have any questions, as I say, there will be a follow-up to this webinar, but do get in touch with us, drop us an email, give us a phone call, and we'll be happily assist you. And hopefully we all look forward to welcoming you on board one of our ships, if not in 2025, 2026. So yeah, but thank you everyone for joining tonight, or in the morning or afternoon, wherever you're located. But yeah, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. All the best.